we are here today because Democrats on this committee are bound and determined to politicize the horrible, tragic events that occurred in Uvalde, Texas. Immediately following the shooting, Democrats demanded information on the, quote, manufacture, marketing, and sale of deadly weapons used in mass shootings, end quote. Since this request on May 26 by Democrats, all of the companies which these letters were sent have been very responsive to the chair's requests, and as I understand, producing over 3,500 pages of documents. So we're here today because Democrats want to somehow blame gun manufacturers for violent crime. While Democrats did not see fit to drag auto manufacturers before this committee to blame the Waukesha Christmas Parade massacre, citing car violence or SU vehicle violence for the murder of 6 people and the injury of 62 others in a violent criminal act, Democrats have coined the term gun violence and determined that guns, which are inanimate objects and unable to commit any crime or act of violence, should be banned. I take issue with that term, as I have never known a gun to be violent. I've known people to be violent, but never an inanimate object like a firearm. I have owned thousands of firearms in my lifetime and have never met, owned, or handled a violent gun. People are the origin of violence, and they use all sorts of tools to perpetuate their violence. We should be holding the criminals accountable. Firearms are simply tools and can be used for good or evil by the person behind the tool. But Democrats want to blame the existence of the Second Amendment, which the Founding Fathers enshrined in the Constitution because they understood the first step toward tyranny is disarming the citizenry. They want to blame the Second Amendment for all the violence that occurs in this country. Let me be clear, gun manufacturers do not cause violence, and the Second Amendment is not to blame for violence in this country. Criminals are the ones who engage in violence and who commit crime. I've been a federal firearms licensee for 30 years. And I realized early on that every firearms business, whether a manufacturer, an importer, or a dealer, is a true constitutional business. Because without them, most citizens would not be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights, which have been so vital in achieving and maintaining our freedoms for now 246 years. I believe a good motto for our nation's firearms industry would be, we enable individual participation in the preservation of liberty. And that, as we know, is what the Second Amendment does. It helps preserve our liberty because it allows individuals to defend themselves against unlawful aggression, whether it is defending against someone committing a crime or against the government bent on tyranny and eliminating our liberty. Since federal firearms licensees are constitutional businesses, it makes it even more imperative that the government use every tool at our disposal to protect these types of businesses so they can continue to serve law-abiding and free citizens. Governments are instituted among men, as our Declaration of Independence says, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Thank you, and I yield back to my colleague from Wisconsin. Mr. Daniel, I want to ask you a couple questions here and reiterate something that's been mentioned already. President Biden made the claim that gun manufacturers are, quote, the only industry in America that is exempt from being sued by the public, the only one. Madam Chair, I would like to ask a unanimous consent to submit this article published by AP News on February 9th, 2022, that says, despite Biden's claim, gun makers can indeed be sued.
Without objection.
Thank you. Isn't it true that your company still remains liable under the law for any potential design or manufacturing defect that lead to injury or property damage or breach of contract or warranty of a product or facilitating a known transfer to a prohibited person? Is this not all laid out in the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act enacted in 2005? Can you still be sued by the public for any of these kind of breaches?
Yes, sir, we can.
So, thank you. I just want everyone to know that the firearms industry is not exempt from being sued by the public for a myriad of things. Now, Mr. Daniel, does Daniel Defense sell AR-15 rifles to police departments, to sheriff's offices, and to other law enforcement agencies?
Yes, sir, about 30, average about 30 agencies a month.
30 agencies a month. That's pretty impressive. Do you have any idea of how many of your company's firearms are in the hands of law enforcement, protecting and defending the peace so that our citizens can live in freedom?
No, sir, I don't have that off the top of my head.
I would imagine that at 30 agencies a month, that's probably a lot, though, would you not think?
Yes, sir.
So why do law enforcement agencies choose to use Daniel Defense Firearms?
Sir, we build we are very dedicated to building the very best firearms in the world, and the products that we build are dependable, and we take good care of our customers and treat them the way we want to be treated. And we think these are the reasons why people choose our products.
Thank you. As someone who has obviously had tremendous experience in the firearms industry and seen the highs and lows of sales, would you agree that the firearms industry is very sensitive to government overregulation or the fear of increased government restriction on a constitutional right?
Yes, sir.
So tell me what happens to sales when additional restrictions are a potential on the horizon. Do they go up or down, or do they stay about the same?
Our sales fluctuate wildly based off of the politics and the conversations about firearms bans.
Okay, does that also happen when crime and uncertainty is on the rise? Do sales increase?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so when the Democrats who have carried the mantle and promoted the idea of defunding the police, and Democrat cities around the country started to cut their budgets, cut the budgets of their police departments to fall in line with the defunding of the police narrative, people have feared for their safety, and so firearms dealers saw an increase in sales. Would you agree?
Yes, sir. Unprecedented in the last 2 years of new firearms owners buying firearms that have never owned them before.
Thank you. I would submit that people are voicing their opinions with their pocketbooks, and I think that's a very, very strong opinion across the nation. Thank you. It may well be true today that a militia, to be as effective as militias in the 18th century, would require sophisticated arms that are highly unusual in society at large. Indeed, it may be true that no amount of small arms could be useful against modern-day bombers and tanks. But the fact that modern developments have limited the degree of fit between the prefatory clause and the protected right cannot change our interpretation of the protected right.
Would my friend yield for a second?
No, I would not. I mean, do you understand what that statement says? That statement says that the Second Amendment protects weapons that are of primary use to a militia. And what is a militia? A militia is all able-bodied personnel that can be called up in defense of a free state. That is exactly what Justice Scalia says in the Heller decision. Now, I would ask Mr. Busey, I think. You said that you have a lot of experience in the firearms industry. How is an AR-15 any different from any other semi-automatic rifle with a detachable magazine? Let's say like a Remington 7400, chambered in .223 or .556.
The AR-15 and the military version rifle on which it is based is designed specifically for offensive use in war, and the Remington rifle to which you refer is not designed for that. There are numerous design factors. I don't think we have enough time. I certainly don't have enough time on this clock to list all the features which denote that.
Okay, do they not both fire one round with a single pull of a trigger?
Yes, sir, they do.
Okay. Do they not fire the same caliber of round, .223 or 5.56 ammunition?
They both can be chambered in that caliber, yes, sir.
Okay. Do they not both feed from a detachable box magazine?
Yes, sir, they do.
Okay. So basically what you see is looks. Just it looks different.
That's not true.
Between a Remington 7400 and an AR-15. It does exactly the same thing.
If that was the case, sir, I would expect that we would be soon arming our special forces with the Remington 7400. I'm not aware of any such demands.
Well, you know, our special forces, they don't use AR-15s, do they?
Some do, yes, sir.
They use M4s.
No, some use AR-15s.
And they have different things that attach to them, like optics and like laser designators and like flashlights and all sorts of other things.
Most of
Okay.
which are available to civilians as well, sir.
Absolutely, they are, okay? But the Remington 7400 does exactly the same thing with every pull of the trigger that an AR-15 does. So I disagree completely with your statement that the AR-15 is a weapon of war.
Sir, you must disagree with the folks
Well,
in the
this is not a
military who
discussion.
request the AR-15 and the
Mr.
military
Busey, this is
version.
not a discussion, okay? Thank you. Now I would ask Ms. Sampson. You said in your statement that though trace data from the dealers or distributors, trace data from manufacturers, through trace data from the manufacturers, or from ATF rather, manufacturers know which dealers or distributors routinely sell crime guns. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. You use this term crime gun. Can you define that term?
A crime gun is a gun where either the possession of the gun itself was a crime or the gun was used in a commission of a crime.
Say that again?
A crime gun was a gun in which either the possession of the gun itself was a crime or was used in the commission of a crime.
Okay. So do you have evidence to show that every trace gun is a crime gun, as you call it?
By definition, yes. And we've seen instances where manufacturers have continued to do business with dealers who have an inordinate amount of traces per year. And the majority of dealers don't have a trace in a year, so if a manufacturer sees the same store continuing to sell crime guns, that should raise an alarm bell to that manufacturer.
But manufacturers primarily sell to distributors, right?
Manufacturers sell to distributors who sell to dealers. But
okay, so the manufacturer's never going to actually see the dealer sale, is he?
Yes, they will. They will understand which dealer the gun came from.
No, if they sell to a distributor, how would they know that?
Through the ATF.
But the ATF's not going to tell them what dealer.
The ATF has actually offered to do that, and manufacturers have refused, and I detail that in my written